Hello, my name's Kevin Delaney. I'm head professional here at Fagan Boys Golf Club. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today we're going to be doing something slightly different. We're going to be looking at different golf clubs and what they can do. So now's the sort of season where people are going to be looking to buy new clubs, and there's loads of stuff coming on the new market. You're going to hear a lot of sort of terms and stuff bandied about, and I'm going to try and debunk some of the myths and tell you what they sort of mean, so that you're better informed when you go to see somebody for a new set of clubs, or understanding what you're seeing online and through social media. Right, so I've watched a couple of videos online recently, different reviews and things like that, to look at new sort of products. And the reason for doing this video was some of the stuff that I saw was the information was misleading. Some of it was just plain false, and I want to give you something that you can sort of watch, so that it puts you in a better informed position, so that when you go to get fitted for a new set of clubs, or you're watching these videos and stuff, that you're in a slightly better informed position to understand what people are talking about. Because there's going to be some sort of terms bandied about, like moment of inertia and forgiveness and things like that, and exactly what does that mean. So right, so I'm going to start off with some irons here. So I've got the ping range. A couple of them are discontinued, but it sort of makes my point and what I want to talk about. So right, so this is the eye blade. So it's not a classic blade in the sense of just like a solid piece of metal. There is a slight, mild, very mild cavity there, but it is a blade in all intents and purposes. So what's the advantages in hitting a blade, and why would you consider a better player more likely to use this club? Right, so in terms of looking at it there, if I bring that into the camera, you can see that the profile of the club, top edge is nice and thin, and the sole, again, that's really important, is very thin there as you're looking at it. So the thinner the sole on the golf club in an iron, you are going to reduce turf drag. So turf drag is obviously, as the club comes into impact, the amount of interaction between the club and the ground, and obviously the wider the sole, that can slow the club down and make it slower through impact potentially. But with a better player's club, a blade, you're going to reduce the turf drag, and then the club's going to hit through a little bit crisper. Now there's advantages and disadvantages to using a blade. The advantage, the big advantage, and the reason that a lot of good players will prefer to use something like this, is distance control. Okay, so if so the blade has a reduced moment of inertia. We're going to park that, I'm going to come back to that and explain what that is. But, so basically, it's got a smaller sweet spot, or it's got a sweet spot there, and the area of forgiveness is around it. If you hit the middle of the club, you're going to get a more consistent ball flight, more consistent spin rate, a more consistent distance. So if the moment of inertia is reduced, that's the advantage in using that. So if I flip that and we go and look at slightly older clubs, so this is the G710, so you can see there a much wider sole and a slightly thicker top line, and then a bigger cavity. So this is actually one of the hollow clubs. So the idea of this is that it pulls the mass away from the club head and away from the club face. So you've got tungsten weights in the toe, tungsten weight in the heel to spread that across, but it's about pulling the mass away from the club face, right? So that increases moment of inertia. So moment of inertia is, as the club comes into impact, the back of the club trying to get to where the face is, right? So the mass is behind, so as you're swinging down, it's trying to catch up, and that increases moment of inertia. And the advantage to that is, as you pull the club face away, pull the mass away from the club face, and the moment of inertia increases, the area of forgiveness on the club face will increase as well, so makes it easier to hit. So across the club face it's a little bit easier. The sweet spot or area of forgiveness is greater than that of the blade, so therefore your off-centre shots will be closer to what your centred shots are. But the trade-off is that you're going to be slightly more inconsistent in distance control. So as the moment of inertia increases, your ability to judge distance will reduce. That's why when you look at a wedge, so if we look at a Vokey wedge or something like that, they're always blades. They're never going to, you're never going to get a big deep cavity in that sort of wedge, because it's about precision, fine engineering and controlling the distance and making sure that you get a consistent shot. There are now some, I think Cleveland and Callaway do a slight cavity in a wedge like that. But again, that's pitched not at the good player, but at the average player that's looking for a little bit of forgiveness, even in a sand iron or a lob wedge. So that's why those Vokeys and stuff like that are blades, because the ability to control the club face and the reduced moment of inertia gives you a consistent ball flight and distance control, and a cavity will give you a greater area of forgiveness, reduced distance control, but you're only probably talking a couple of yards, nothing major, and easier to hit. So that's your trade-off. And obviously then you can go into the middle where we can go, okay, so I've got the blade and I've got the G425 here, and that's going to sit perfectly in the middle between the eye blade and what they're doing now with the sort of blueprint, which again for ping, much smaller club head, reduced moment of inertia, it's a difficult club to hit, but if you hit it out the middle, the consistency's there. Now these rules apply into drivers and stuff like that as well, and we're going to have a look at that next. Right, so I've got 3 drivers with me. I've got Callaway Maverick, Ping G425, and I've got my driver, which is a G400. Right, so and what are the differences? When it comes to driver, the same rules around moment of inertia and area of forgiveness apply, but it really notices. So you get different types of driver. So if you look at the latest ones that have been released, you've got the TaylorMade Stealth and the Callaway Rogue ST. So I haven't got them with me today, but I haven't got them. We'll have a look at them in a week or two. So what's the difference between those clubs and other clubs, and what are the advantages and disadvantages in using them? Okay, so a few years ago, there was a real race to the bottom in terms of spin rate. So manufacturers were going for the lowest spinning drivers that they could possibly produce. So if you go back to the TaylorMade SLDR driver, it's probably the lowest spinning driver that you can get. If you hit it out the middle, it is an absolute rocket. It will go, but the area of forgiveness around the face is dramatically reduced. So because they've pulled the mass of the club face further forward, and it's got that little slidey bar on it, the sweet spot or area of forgiveness on the club face is small. So if you can find it, you're going to hit it a long way, but if you don't, you get some real big lefts and rights, and I don't think they did twist face then, but like, it wouldn't make a difference what they did, because the backspin rate's so low that the ball just doesn't stay on the face and it just falls off left and right. So you can hit some really long drives, but you can also hit some really rubbish ones. So clubs have sort of moved away from that a little bit. So Callaway did the Sub-Zero range for a number of years. They don't do that anymore. They do last year was the Epic LS, so the low spin, and then they've got the Rogue ST LS, and then that Triple Diamond LS as well, which isn't going to be for a lot of people. But there's a couple of things with drivers that aren't necessarily talked about that should be. Right, so I've got 2 clubs here. So this is a Callaway Maverick, and this is a Ping G425 driver. So this is sort of just over a year old, still current last year, and will be available for sale this year as well. This is Ping's current driver. Right, now one thing that nobody ever talks about is head mass. Okay, so the weight of the club matters. So I've weighed these clubs. This club head weighs 193 grams. This club head weighs 202. So there's roughly 10 grams of difference between the 2 clubs. Then you factor in the weight of the shaft. So this one's got a 45 gram shaft in a regular, and this is a 55 gram shaft in a regular. So this club head is heavier than this club. Right, so what are the advantages and disadvantages in using a heavier golf club as opposed to a lighter golf club? Simple. A lighter golf club, when you're swinging it, you are more likely to hit it out of the middle. It's just easier to move through the air, and you're more likely to hit it out the middle. The heavier the golf club gets, you reduce the chance of hitting it out the middle. Now you can get any golf club and change the club head weight. So a lot of them, or most of them, you can do it. So for example, with the Maverick, they have the screw-in weights. You can get aftermarket weights to change the mass of the club head. Same with Ping, but Ping is that little bit heavier anyway. So why would you use a heavier golf club? Because it will go further. Just basic physics. best way to describe it is, and something that I say to people is, imagine that you're standing there with a sledgehammer and a pin hammer and you're trying to move a fence post into the ground. If you've got the fence post and you swing the pin hammer, you're going to hit that fence post every single time, but the actual energy transfer from the pin hammer to the fence post is going to be minimal and you're not going to move it. If you get the sledgehammer, occasionally you'll do some big swings and occasionally you'll hit it. Most of the time you might miss it, but when you hit it, that fence post is going to be moved into the ground. Now, you're not necessarily moving one thing quicker than the other, but because the heavier object has more mass, that mass is then imparted onto the object that's at rest, and this is Newton's second law of motion. An object at rest will stay at rest unless acted upon by an equal or opposite force, I think it is. So if you hit that second object with the heavier thing, then it's going to move more, but it becomes slightly unwieldy. And it's the same thing with golf clubs. So as you get heavier shafts, the weight will go up. So I use a 75 gram shaft as opposed to the standard 55 gram shaft, so it becomes a little bit harder to move through the air. But you can actually achieve slower swing speeds with a heavier golf club than you will with a lighter one and hit it further. So that's why it's really important to go for a fitting. Now, when we come back to the moment of inertia, and we'll talk about that. So with your low spinning ones, your Formula, your Sub-Zeros or your LS, you shift the weight further forward, closer to the face, as opposed to with the ping, which has got the greatest moment of inertia, so it's got most mass further back. So it makes it easier to hit. So with a ping, you've got the heavier golf club, but it's actually easier to hit. So therefore, that's your trade-off. You've got the ability that if you stand there and middle it, that it's going to go further, and your bad shots are going to go a little bit less. The Callaway being that bit lighter, but it's with the mass slightly further forward, perhaps, then it's going to be a fraction harder to hit. So your additional speed distance is going to come from that, as opposed to your low spin ones where they really do crank the weight forward. Now, one thing that I saw that was misleading, I thought, the other day, was a review where it was talking about the new Stealth driver, and it said about it's carbon face, which is not new technology. That's been done 15 years ago or whatever by Yonex. Put carbon face on it, it makes it lighter. If you've ever picked up an actual golf club face, they don't weigh much anyway, so a carbon face isn't going to be a lot. And what they've done is they've shifted the mass further back in the club head. That makes sense. Okay, so the last year's ping, the SLDR driver, was a lower spinning club, which is great when you hit it out the middle, but it's not as forgiving. Sorry, not the SLDR, the last year's one, whatever it was. So they've shifted the mass further back. Now, the review said that that's going to give you more energy moving through the ball. Well, actually, that's not true, because if you move the mass further back, actually what you're going to do is increase the moment of inertia. It's not going to make you hit it further. What it's going to make it is an easier to hit golf club. It's actually going to increase spin rates, keep the ball in the air for longer. It's going to have the reverse effect. It's going to make you not hit it as far as previously. So the fact that it's lighter will give you the option to swing it through the air quicker, but if you move the mass further back, it increases the spin rate and reduces the ability to hit it further. So actually that driver does look, I haven't hit it, but it does look really good in the distances and the numbers, and that look great. So that might be to do with the club face, but putting weight back in the club head is about increasing the moment of inertia and making that actually an easier golf club to hit, which is a good thing, because that means that the new TaylorMade driver is easier to hit than last year's one. And if it does go further, that's great, but it's probably a lighter one. So I'd like to know exactly what the club head weight is, the mass weight of that, as opposed to the other ones. But there's loads of things that you need to ask. So if you're going for a fitting, ask your fitter, how much does that club head weigh, as opposed to that one? Is there anything that we can do? Can we change that? For example, I know that I was in a seminar thing a while ago with a Titleist fitter, and he said that Ian Poulter was using a driver head mass that was 190 grams. That's what he liked, because you could get it through the air quicker, and then he changed it to a club head that was 20 grams heavier, because he felt that then he could get, alright, so there's your trade-off. The second golf club's not going to be as easy to swing, but he can hit it further, so that's why you're going to change it. So talk to your fitter, ask them, head mass, is there an option, should we think about something else? Shaft, shaft again, really important. One manufacturer's stiff shaft is another manufacturer's regular. Weights, flexes change. You've got to ask these questions and go and see somebody good.
and they'll give you the answers. Listen, I hope you found that beneficial, and check back in with the channel, and we are going to be looking at the sort of newer clubs when they come through to the shop and have a look at them. We're also going to be doing some more sort of tutorial stuff, get you some things to get you going through the winter months, because none of us are playing a lot of golf at the moment, but you've got the opportunity to get some practice time in, go to the range and stuff like that. So what we're going to put out there is things that are going to help you with that. Remember to smash that thumbs up, guys, hit the subscribe button. Hope you enjoyed the video.